This video is made possible by NordVPN. Go to nordvpn.com/VPEN and get 4 months extra on a 2-year plan. More on this in a moment. When in February 2022, dozens of Russian tanks, helicopters, and soldiers crossed the Ukrainian border, EU leaders not only understood that the drums of war were beating on their own doorstep, but also that their fragile energy security was gone. However, time has passed, and although the war in Ukraine and sanctions on Russia continue, these days things look very different.
21 August 2023, EU to reach its gas storage target months ahead of deadline. 31 August 2023, EU gas supply when Russia went into self-destruct mode. 11 October 2023, Europe set for first cold snap and test of energy systems.
VisualPolitik community, there is not much of the energy terror left in Brussels. Yes, Europe today has more expensive energy, and this is affecting many industries, but in spite of everything, the worst forecasts have not come true. In the summer, we even saw statements like this one.
18 August 2023, the EU's gas storage has reached 90%, well ahead of schedule. This will help us be safe this winter. Together, we are weaning ourselves off Russian gas, and we keep working in parallel on more diverse energy supplies for the future. Ursula von der Leyen.
Of course, it is still too early to declare victory. While before the war, Russian gas accounted for about 40% of the total imported by the EU. Since then, its share has decreased at full speed, but has been mostly replaced by massive imports of liquefied gas, LNG, from the US and some African partners. This may have mitigated the gas shortage this winter, but may not have been entirely sustainable in the long term. Yet, if by the winter of 2024 a sufficient stock of gas has been secured, the headaches may only have been postponed. You see, in theory, the EU could increase the inflows of liquefied natural gas in the short term by about 60 billion cubic meters compared to the average of 2021. However, the problem is that the whole world is fighting over this gas. And we are not only talking about Europe, but also about Asia. Today, the natural gas market is extremely tight, and any unforeseen event could send prices soaring. Europe needs new sources of energy and natural resources. And it goes without saying that new sources require new partners. The question is, who can be trusted in a world that is becoming more and more turbulent? A Middle East that is red hot? A Southeast Asia under the threat of siege from China? An African continent where wars are breaking out all over the place? I'm no expert, but they don't seem like the best options in the world. At least not the safest, don't you agree? But wait a minute, what about Latin America?
15 May 2023, Venezuela signs an agreement with Repsol and Eni to export gas to Europe. 13 June 2023, the EU hastens the agreement with Mercosur and promised more investments in lithium in Argentina. 14 June 2023, Chile and the European Union strengthen ties in green hydrogen with a view to sustainable development. 3 November 2023, Brazil recorded record oil and gas production in September.
VisualPolitik community, Latin America not only has gigantic oil and gas reserves, as well as many other natural resources, but it is also a region where armed clashes continue to be conspicuous by their absence. And that's precisely why here on VisualPolitik we have asked ourselves a few questions. Could LATAM be a reliable partner for achieving the energy transition proposed by Brussels? Which countries in the Southern Cone could sustain a strategic relationship with the EU? Would Latin America be able to replace Russia? Well, we tell you all this and more. Let's get started. Today we're going to answer all of these questions, but first, let me ask you another one. Have you heard of ransomware? No, it's not a heavy metal band or something like that. Look, imagine that you're surfing the internet and, without really knowing why, you end up on a website of a supposed antivirus software. The thing is that you download the software to test it, and that's it. You've just installed a fake antivirus that has access to all your data, and now they're going to encrypt that data in exchange for a ransom. Or worse, they're going to steal it to sell them to a third party. If you think this can't happen to you, you may be right. But be very careful, because it may happen to your parents, since the elderly are often the target audience of ransomware. So what can we do? Always be very careful. Keep your system updated and use NordVPN's threat protection tool to be safe. Threat protection works in the background even when your device isn't connected to a VPN server. And not only that, remember that when you use NordVPN, you can browse without borders, unlocking a whole world of content. It is also compatible with all types of devices: Android, Windows, Mac, Linux, and you can include up to 6 devices with a single account. So don't wait any longer. Check out NordVPN and get 4 months extra on a 2-year plan by going to nordvpn.com/VPEN. And if you change your mind after trying it out, don't worry, NordVPN has a 30-day money-back guarantee.
A toxic relationship.
Do you know that saying, forewarned is forearmed? Well, if the answer is yes, you are lucky, because everything indicates that in Brussels, they have never heard it. Gradually, the relationship between Europe and Russia became something of a toxic relationship, a relationship in which Europe became tremendously dependent. In 2014, this became perfectly clear when Moscow and Kyiv had their first clash following the Russian annexation of Crimea.
26 March 2014, Obama urges EU to diversify its energy sources to end dependence on Russia. 9 September 2014, European dependence on Russian gas could be reduced in a context of energy efficiency. 17 March 2015, Europe's vulnerability to Russian gas. European member states have varying degrees of exposure to disruption of supplies from Russia, which must be addressed to secure the future of the EU energy union.
However, at that time, although Brussels' distrust of the Kremlin existed, it was not so great. After all, how on earth were the Russians going to give up the tons of euros and dollars sent to them every year by the European countries? A clear illustration of this thinking was these statements from former German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Take a look.
In the perspective of the time, it was very rational and understandable to source gas from the grid, including from Russia, which was less expensive than LNG, liquefied natural gas, from other regions of the world. Angela Merkel.
Anyway, what's done is done. What can I say? Europe only took the problem of Russian dependence seriously when the Kremlin stuck its claws into Ukraine for the second time. Mind you, to be fair, it must be said that since 2014, some European groups have been working on contingency plans around the massive import of liquefied gas. Some of these pre-designed initiatives gave shape to the Repower EU strategy in May 2020. We're talking about nothing less than the EU's official plan to break with Russia and completely reformulate its energy matrix. According to this plan, 3 fundamental criteria will be followed from now on in the old continent: energy savings, substitution of energy sources, and diversification of the origin of fossil fuels. Increased investments in solar and wind power, along with expanded use of coal and nuclear power, led to a significant drop in natural gas consumption during the first 6 months of 2023. The plan appears to be working. The problem is that this is something that has been achieved with more expensive energy and with a huge logistical challenge that could fail at any time. And it is right here that Latin America has suddenly come into Brussels' sights, from the bubbling black gold of Venezuela to Vaca Muerta shale from Argentina to the astonishing wealth of oil reserves that Brazil has discovered. Could LATAM really come to Europe's aid? Well, we're about to find out.
Oil, a runaway train.
It's no joke that Russia is not an easy supplier to replace. Russia's crude oil reserves are estimated at some 107 billion barrels of crude oil, compared to more than 320 billion barrels for Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, and Venezuela. However, despite having more oil, the performance of the New World is disappointing, to say the least. As you can see, only Brazil has managed to strongly increase its production in recent years. Meanwhile, Venezuela and Mexico, which began the 21st century as true oil titans, have gone from bad to worst, while Argentine and Colombian production has remained stagnant. To give you an idea, according to estimates by the Energy Institute, these 5 nations produced around 9.6 million barrels per day in 2003. 2 decades later, the sum barely reaches 7 million. And it's not because they don't have crude oil, but basically because the various governments have not been able to exploit it. The most curious thing of all is that, not so long ago, Latin America's oil production was much higher than that of Russia's. In Venezuela, what can I say? The Bolivarian Revolution put an end to the oil dream, and it did so not due to social conviction, but basically because of incompetence. In Mexico, something very similar happened. The management of Pemex has been a disaster, and in Colombia, well, Here on VisualPolitik, we've already told you how Petro wants to put an end to this industry. Of the 5 countries, only Brazil seems to have taken this issue seriously, and that is because its production is mainly in super deep waters, which is logically much more complicated and much more expensive.
1 September 2023, Brazilian pre-salt oil gains unprecedented global popularity. Petrobras will allocate $41 billion in investment to increase oil production by 19% between now and 2027.
And that's not all. It is no longer that Latin America has problems extracting its oil, it is that it has also failed to develop a reasonable refining capacity, which is the process needed to turn bubbly black gold into fuel. With the exception of Brazil, the capacity of the rest of the region remains stuck at 1980s levels. Ridiculous. All this is what explains why, despite having many resources, it is not uncommon to see news items like these.
10 January 2019, alarm over fuel shortages spreads to Mexico City. 22 June 2023, gasoline shortage in Venezuela, a crisis turned into routine. 13 October 2023, gasoline shortage is felt at the beginning of the long weekend.
The problem is that Europe's refining capacity has followed a very similar path. Nobody likes to have dirty, ugly refineries close to home. In other words, all this lack of investment means that in the short term, Latin America's ability to replace Russia as Europe's supplier of choice is limited. But if, for now, Latin American crude oil does not seem to be the definitive option, what about gas? Well, check it out.
The Latin gas solution.
It is no secret that when it comes to gas, Russia is a colossal world champion. With more than 40 trillion cubic meters of proven reserves, Russia's gas reserves are 5 times larger than the known gas in Latin America. Even so, in this area, the Latin American industry has performed much better than the oil industry. And on top of that, fracking could work miracles. Of course, we have to look again on a case-by-case basis. For example, in Brazil, natural gas has a very important industrial use. Nevertheless, they continue to dump gas. Yes, that's correct. Throwing away gas, burning it unnecessarily due to a lack, especially of infrastructure. Then, on the other hand, Mexico is one of the best positioned countries. Its gas sector is highly developed, but it has one dominant feature: its interdependence with the USA. Mexico exports natural gas to the US, but also imports it to take advantage of lower processing costs in its North American neighbor. This has spurred the construction and completion of huge pipeline networks throughout the country.
For October 2020, the Guadalajara gas pipeline network is already fully operational. 3 May 2023, Pacific Limited will invest $14 billion in a gas pipeline in Mexico. 12 October 2023, the United States will close 2023 with record natural gas exports thanks to Mexico.
As for Argentina, between 2005 and 2015, the Gaucho country fell behind due to the depletion of conventional wells. The Argentines even had to import gas despite having Vaca Muerta, one of the potentially largest gas reserves in the world. Fortunately, that is changing. In fact, in July 2023, the President Nestor Kirchner gas pipeline was inaugurated, which will allow them to export gas again from 2024. In Bolivia, however, they do not seem to be in any luck.
1 September 2023, the Bolivian government admitted that gas is finished. By 2029, the country will have to import it. President Luis Arce says that reserves have been depleted and that exports to Argentina and Brazil must be interrupted, leaving a huge hole in the country's economy.
Finally, Venezuela is the only country that has registered a significant increase in production levels in recent years. However, as with oil, good intentions are not enough. Having reserves, or even significant production levels, is not enough. It is also necessary to have suitable infrastructure to be able to export the gas. Well, here, Latinos also lag far behind Russians. Of course, it is not only pipelines that are needed. In order to export the gas to Europe, liquefaction plants are also needed. That is, facilities to convert the gas into liquid form for transport in large methane tankers. Latin America will require a lot of investment and several years to make this possible. Yet, in the long run, it could fit in with European needs. However, we are still a long way from this being the case. In the short term, neither Mexican gas nor Vaca Muerta, nor Brazilian offshore hydrocarbons will be able to replace Russia in Europe's energy mix. But then, the question is, what solution do they have in mind in Brussels? With no possible partners, what can we expect from 2025 onwards for the energy matrix of the old continent? Is European energy security gone, never to return? Stay tuned.
Hydrogen. Is it the answer inside Europe?
Well, VisualPolitik viewers, I know what you're probably thinking. Surely, in Brussels they are counting on renewables to be the solution to everything, right? We don't blame you. In recent decades, the optimism about solar and wind energy has been enormous, and the truth is that today their role is key. European renewables capacity has increased by 1,500% in the last 20 years. It has certainly been a crucial element in Europe not going dark after the Russian pipeline blackout. However, despite this, Brussels' latest hope seems to lie in a fuel, but a non-fossil one. We are talking, of course, about, you guessed it, hydrogen. Hydrogen-based power generation is possible when, in a fuel cell, hydrogen is introduced on one side and oxygen on the other. On the hydrogen side, protons split and create an electric current. The released electrons generate electricity, and on the oxygen side, they combine with the protons and form water as the only byproduct. And no, don't worry, it's not that we're trying to be scientists, it's just that we need to understand how electricity is produced with hydrogen to understand a crucial reality. It's delocalization. The process is not subject to any reserves, deposits, or supplies that are tied to a geographical reality. Indeed, therein lies its enormous potential. Hydrogen could eventually guarantee Europe energy self-sufficiency. Of course, the only thing that is needed in this process is hydrogen, but this could be obtained in different ways. For example, grey hydrogen is known as hydrogen produced from fossil energy sources such as natural gas, oil, or coal, while green hydrogen is produced from renewable energy sources with low or zero pollutant emissions associated with the process. But what differentiates hydrogen from wind or solar energy? Basically, it is storable. Hydrogen can be stored and used when needed, for example, as fuel or to generate electricity. For many, this would solve the great problem of conventional renewable energies: intermittency and irregularity. Europe could even export this clean fuel. Of course, this option also raises many doubts about its efficiency. Many experts argue that it will never be an efficient process, and that it also requires suitable infrastructure that would take time and money to build. Be that as it may, hydrogen is in Brussels' plans, and there are already many investments in the pipeline to develop this energy source.
Fortunately, existing natural gas infrastructure can act as a catalyst to expand hydrogen transportation. In the short to medium term, blending hydrogen into natural gas can facilitate the initial development of trade, while repurposing gas pipelines can significantly reduce the cost of establishing national and regional hydrogen networks. Global Hydrogen Review 2021, IEA.
In September 2022, Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, France, Greece, Italy, the Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Slovakia, Spain, and Sweden signed up to the IPCEI High to Use project, which provides for up to 5.2 billion euros in public funding and an additional 7 billion euros in private investment. Meanwhile, in March 2023, the EU announced the creation of the European Hydrogen Bank, which would be responsible for mitigating the cost difference between renewable hydrogen and fossil fuels for the continent's first operational projects. The result? As you can see on this map, Europe is the region with the most hydrogen projects in the world. VisualPolitik community, right now, it is impossible to know whether it will ultimately be hydrogen, liquefied natural gas, or even supplies from Latin America that will shape Europe's new energy matrix. The opportunities and problems are on the table. The only certainty is that Europe will never again be dependent on Russian oil and gas. Latin America once again has a great opportunity to tap a huge source of investment and dollars. Will it take advantage of it? Only time will tell. For now, the questions are for you. What role do you think hydrogen will play in Europe's energy security? Could Latin America take advantage of this opportunity to redirect a huge river of dollars and euros? Leave us your answers in the comments. And as always, if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to VisualPolitik if you haven't already done so. Thank you so very much for watching. All the best. See you next time.